Tonight, we delve into a chilling tale from the depths of Reddit's Let's Not Meet community. A story that will leave you questioning the shadows in your own life. This is The Smiling Man. It was late. The streets were deserted. The kind of night where you can hear your own heartbeat echo off the buildings. Our protagonist, let's call him John, was walking home, his mind lost in the day's events. That's when he saw him. A man standing in the middle of the street staring at John. But it wasn't just any stare. It was a wide, unnaturally wide smile. His eyes, wide and unblinking, seemed to pierce through the night. John's first thought was perhaps he was just seeing things. Maybe the streetlight was playing tricks. But as he walked closer, the man didn't move, didn't blink, just kept smiling. His clothes were old, mismatched, as if time had lost interest in him. John tried to ignore him, quickening his pace. But the smiling man began to move, not towards John, but in a circle around him, still smiling, always smiling. His movements were odd, almost like he was dancing to some silent, macabre tune only he could hear. John's heart raced. The grin on the man's face grew wider with each step he took. It wasn't a smile of joy or recognition. It was something else, something wrong. In a moment of sheer instinct, John turned and ran. Behind him, he could hear the man's laughter. Not the laughter of someone enjoying a moment, but the laughter of someone who knew something you didn't. And here's where we leave you, with a question. What do you think the smiling man was? A figment of fear, or something more sinister, lurking in the shadows of our world? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And remember, next time you walk alone at night, keep your eyes peeled for those who smile too wide in the dark. It was the middle of winter when I arrived at the hotel. A small, run-down place, miles from anywhere. Just the kind of place you go when you're looking for a cheap, quiet stop. I didn't know it then, but this hotel held secrets. Secrets that would change everything. When I checked in, the receptionist handed me my room key, room 733. She hesitated as she gave it to me, almost as if she didn't want to. Then in a whisper so soft I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Don't go there after dark." I chuckled, assuming it was just a strange superstition. But her eyes, those eyes told me she wasn't joking. I thought nothing of it and made my way to the room. The hotel was dark, creaking with age, and the hallways smelled of stale carpet and dust. Room 733 was at the end of the long, narrow corridor. The door looked old, the number barely visible on the tarnished plaque. When I opened the door, a cold breeze rushed past me, and I shivered. The room itself was shabby, but clean. I threw my bags on the bed and tried to relax, but something felt off. The air was too still, the silence too thick. I noticed a crack in the mirror above the dresser, small but noticeable. It looked as though someone had tried to repair it quickly, but the crack remained. That night I couldn't sleep. The silence was unnerving, and I kept hearing faint tapping noises from the hall, growing louder. I tried to ignore it, but it wouldn't stop. Then I dreamt, or at least I thought I did. I was still in the room, but everything was wrong. The walls seemed to close in on me, the air heavy with tension. In the corner of the room, a shadowy figure stood, watching me. I woke up in a cold sweat, heart racing. But the figure from the dream, it felt too real. I turned on the lamp, trying to shake it off, but when the light flickered, I saw something that made my blood run cold. The reflection in the mirror was distorted. The figure from my dream, tall, shadowy, with hollow eyes, stood behind me in the reflection, even though I was alone in the room. I spun around, but the room was empty. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't open. The knob turned, but it was stuck. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward me, and I could hear whispers, faint but growing louder. I screamed and banged on the door, desperate to escape, but the room wouldn't let me leave. Finally, the door flew open, and I stumbled out into the hallway, gasping for breath. I ran straight to the front desk, barely able to speak. The receptionist looked at me with a knowing expression, her face pale. "Room 733, she whispered. "No one stays there. It's cursed." I never returned to that hotel. To this day, I wonder if the thing I saw in the mirror was just a figment of my imagination, or if something truly haunted that room. But I know one thing for sure. Room 733 is not a place anyone should visit. The hotel is long gone now, torn down to make room for something new. But every now and then I hear whispers of people who claim to have stayed there, always speaking of room 733 with fear in their voices. I can only hope that whoever stays there next makes it out alive. It was a cold, eerie evening when I checked into the hotel. It was an old building on the outskirts of town, run down and creaky, but I didn't mind. I just needed a place to stay for the night. The receptionist handed me my key, but there was something strange in her eyes. It was a cold, eerie evening when I checked into the hotel. It was an old building on the outskirts of town, run down and creaky, but I didn't mind. I just needed a place to stay for the night. The receptionist handed me my key, but there was something strange in her eyes, a flicker of fear that I couldn't place. The key had a tag that read 733. She looked at me nervously and whispered, "Don't go there after dark." I shrugged it off as superstition, but her face remained pale as she gave me one last warning. "Room 733. No one stays there after dark." I thought she was just being strange, but those words would haunt me for the rest of my life. I made my way down the dark hallway to the room. The hotel seemed quiet, too quiet. The air felt thick, heavy, like something was waiting. Room 733 was at the end of the hall, the door old and worn, its brass plaque barely visible. I unlocked the door and a cold draft rushed past me, chilling me to the bone. Inside, the room was shabby, but clean enough. I tried to settle in, but something felt off. The silence was unsettling, and the air felt too still. I noticed a crack in the mirror above the dresser, small but noticeable. It looked like it had been repaired hastily, but the crack remained. It seemed to draw me in, like I couldn't look away. I shrugged it off, trying to calm myself. Later that night, the silence was shattered by faint tapping sounds coming from the hallway. I lay in bed, trying to ignore it, but the tapping grew louder, closer. The door creaked slightly and I could hear soft whispers. My mind raced as I stared at the ceiling, wide awake. Then I fell into a restless sleep, and that's when it started. I dreamt I was still in the room, but everything was wrong. The walls seemed to close in around me, and a figure appeared in the corner, tall and dark, with hollow eyes that stared straight through me. I woke up in a panic, my heart racing, drenched in sweat. But the feeling of being watched didn't go away. I turned toward the mirror above the dresser, and to my horror, the figure from my dream was there, standing behind me in the reflection. Its eyes were empty, its mouth stretched into a twisted grin. I spun around, but there was no one there. I stumbled backward in fear, my breath shallow. I rushed to the door, but it wouldn't open. The knob turned, but the door was stuck, as though something was keeping me inside. The shadows in the room seemed to stretch toward me, and the whispers grew louder, more frantic. I banged on the door, screaming, but nothing happened. Finally, in a rush of panic, the door flew open on its own, and I bolted into the hallway, gasping for breath. I ran to the front desk, barely able to speak. The receptionist was still there, her face drained of color. She knew. She didn't need to ask. "Room 733, she whispered. "No one stays there. It's cursed. The room traps you, and no one has ever escaped." I didn't stay long enough to hear more. I grabbed my things and left, vowing never to return. The hotel was torn down soon after, replaced by something newer, but every now and then I hear whispers of people who stayed in room 733. They say it's still out there, waiting for its next victim. And I can't shake the feeling that somehow room 733 will never truly be gone.